Opening. When nature writes history, not every civilization falls because of war. Not every empire ends at the point of a sword, or through the slow erosion of poor governance, or because a stronger rival finally finds its moment. Some civilizations face something that no army can fight, something that no law, no treaty, no diplomat, and no god, however faithfully worshipped, can stop. They face the earth itself. Act 1. The civilization the sea built. In the ancient Aegean world, long before Greece rose to prominence, one civilization stood apart: the Minoans of Crete. They were not builders of pyramids or carvers of vast stone reliefs. They did not leave inscriptions boasting of military victories because they seemed to have had remarkably few military victories to boast about. The Minoans did not conquer the ancient world. They traded with it. From their great palaces on Crete, at Knossos, Paistos, Malea, and Zakros, Minoan merchants sent ships in every direction across the eastern Mediterranean. Their pottery and olive oil reached Egypt. Their textiles and metalwork went to Anatolia. Their art appeared on the walls of Egyptian tombs, where Minoan ambassadors are shown bearing gifts before the pharaoh. Their traders operated in the ports of the Levant. The Palace of Knossos was one of the architectural wonders of the Bronze Age. Covering an area larger than Buckingham Palace, it was a labyrinthine complex of storage rooms, reception halls, workshops, shrines, and private apartments, connected by staircases, light wells, and a drainage system sophisticated enough to impress modern engineers. Its walls were covered in vivid frescoes: blue dolphins leaping through painted waves, young men and women somersaulting over the backs of charging bulls, processions of elegant figures bearing offerings. The Minoans were the first literate civilization in Europe. Their script, which we call Linear A, is still undeciphered, one of the last great mysteries of ancient writing. We cannot read what they said about themselves. We can only read what they left behind in stone and fresco and clay. And what they left behind suggests a world of extraordinary color, sophistication, and vitality. Unlike every other major civilization of its time, the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, the Mycenaeans, the Minoans built their great palaces without massive defensive walls. Their protection was the sea itself. Their navy, or at least their dominance of the sea lanes, made invasion almost unthinkable. This was their greatest strength. It was also, in the end, their greatest vulnerability. Act 2. Thera. The volcano that waited. 110 kilometers north of Crete, an island rose from the sea like a crown. The Greeks would call it Thera. We know it today as Santorini. In the middle of the second millennium BCE, Thera was home to a thriving Minoan-influenced settlement. The town, now called Akrotiri, excavated since the 1960s beneath meters of volcanic ash, was a prosperous multi-story urban settlement with frescoed walls, sophisticated plumbing, and storerooms full of goods from across the Mediterranean trading network. Beneath it, as beneath all of Santorini, lay something that its inhabitants could not have fully understood: a volcano. One of the most dangerous on Earth. The signs came before the end. Minor earthquakes shook the island in the months or years before the eruption. The people of Akrotiri appear to have evacuated in time. The site preserves no human remains, which is extraordinary. They packed what they could carry and left. Perhaps they returned later. Perhaps they never did. And then the volcano erupted. What geologists call the Minoan eruption of Thera was one of the largest volcanic events in the past 10,000 years of Earth's history. Modern estimates place its volcanic explosivity index at 7, comparable to the 1815 eruption of Tambora in Indonesia, which killed tens of thousands directly and caused the year without a summer across the northern hemisphere. The explosion sent an ash column estimated at 30 to 40 kilometers into the stratosphere. The sound is estimated to have been audible from as far away as Scandinavia. The caldera that formed when the volcano's magma chamber emptied and collapsed was so vast that the sea rushed in to fill it, creating the dramatic horseshoe shape of modern Santorini. The tsunamis that followed would have struck the northern shores of Crete within minutes. Act 3. A civilization shaken, the immediate physical destruction was immense. but the longer-term consequences for the Minoan world may have been even more devastating. Archaeologists have found evidence of destruction and abandonment at multiple Minoan sites in the period following the eruption. The ash fall, even at the distances involved, would have contaminated water supplies, damaged crops, and poisoned the pastures on which the agricultural base of Cretan society depended. An ash cloud of this magnitude would have cooled temperatures across the eastern Mediterranean for one or more growing seasons, perhaps triggering famine in a civilization whose entire wealth rested on the production and trade of agricultural surpluses. The sea trade on which the Minoans depended would have been devastated in the short term. Ports damaged, ships sunk, the trade networks disrupted. The commercial relationships that had taken generations to build were interrupted, some permanently. The Minoans were resilient. Knossos survived the immediate catastrophe. Reconstruction began. Trade resumed at some level, but something had broken that could not be fully repaired. A civilization built on confidence in the sea, on the belief that the Aegean was a reliable highway of commerce and communication, had been shown in the most dramatic possible terms that the sea was not reliable, that the world itself was not reliable, and weakened civilizations attract the attention of stronger neighbors. Act 4. The Mycenaeans arrive. On the Greek mainland, a very different kind of Bronze Age culture had been growing throughout the period of Minoan dominance. The Mycenaeans. Where the Minoans had built open palaces and traded with the world, the Mycenaeans built fortresses. Their palace complexes at Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos, and elsewhere were surrounded by massive walls of enormous stone blocks, the so-called Cyclopean masonry, so named because later Greeks believed only giants could have moved such stones. Their rulers were buried in shaft graves and tholos tombs filled with weapons, gold death masks, and war chariots. The Mycenaeans had long been in contact with the Minoans, absorbing Minoan art, Minoan script, adapting Linear A into their own Linear B writing system, and Minoan religious symbols. In many ways, the Mycenaean elite was culturally Minoansed, but culturally influenced is not the same as subordinate. From around 1450 BCE, roughly a century to a century and a half after the Thera eruption, depending on which dating is accepted, the archaeological evidence at Knossos and other Cretan sites shows a dramatic change. Minoan Linear A gives way to Mycenaean Linear B. Mycenaean pottery replaces Minoan styles. The administrative records of Knossos are written in an early form of Greek. The Mycenaeans had taken Crete. How this happened is not entirely clear from the archaeological record. There is evidence of burning and destruction at some Cretan sites around this time, suggesting a military conquest. But at Knossos itself, the palace continued to function, apparently under Mycenaean management, for some time before its final destruction around 1375 BCE. The transition may have been gradual. Infiltration, intermarriage, and political dominance rather than a single dramatic conquest. Or it may have been swift and violent. The evidence supports both possibilities. What is not in doubt is the outcome. The Minoans were no longer in control of their own world. Act 5. The long fading. Minoans did not vanish overnight. Under Mycenaean oversight, some aspects of Minoan culture persisted for generations. Minoan craftsmen continued working. Minoan religious practices influenced the developing Greek religious tradition. The bull cult of Crete, the goddess figures, the double axe symbol all left clear traces in later Greek religion and mythology. The story of the Minotaur, the half-human, half-bull monster dwelling in the labyrinth beneath the palace of Knossos, to whom Athens sent tribute of young men and women, may be a distorted folk memory of the Minoan bull-leaping ritual, of the labyrinthine corridors of Knossos, and of the economic and political subordination of mainland Greek communities to the dominant Cretan sea power. But memory is not survival. By around 1100 BCE, in the broader chaos of the Bronze Age collapse that we will examine in the next episode, the last Minoan-influenced palace cultures of Crete had fallen silent. The great storerooms were empty. The frescoes were no longer being painted. The ships no longer sailed on behalf of Knossos. A civilization that had flourished for 1,600 years, longer than the entire history of the Roman Empire, was gone. Linear A, the script in which the Minoans had recorded their world, was abandoned. It has never been read. What the Minoans called themselves, what language they spoke, what prayers they made to their gods, remains to this day unknown. Closing. Nature as a force of history. The eruption of Thera did not by itself destroy the Minoan civilization. Historians are careful about this. The relationship between the volcano and the Minoan decline is real but complex. The eruption weakened. The Mycenaeans took advantage. Later, the Bronze Age collapse finished what had begun. No single event explains the end of so complex a civilization, but the story of the Minoans and Thera is important for reasons beyond the fate of one Aegean culture. It is the clearest example in the ancient world of what we might call natural history, the way that geological and climatic events shape the human story as decisively as any battle or political crisis. The same principle appears throughout this series: the drought that helped collapse the Aegean Empire, the Nile flood failures that weakened the Old Kingdom, the climate disruptions behind the Bronze Age collapse. Nature and history are not separate subjects. They never have been. Some scholars believe that the story of Thera and the Minoans is the origin of Plato's legend of Atlantis, the great island civilization, supremely powerful and magnificently sophisticated, swallowed by the sea in a single catastrophic day and night. Whether or not that connection is real, the parallel is haunting. A civilization that believed the sea was its protection, a disaster from the depths of the sea that destroyed it, and a legend, preserved for thousands of years, of something extraordinary that was lost. Today, tourists visit Santorini for its beauty, the white houses clinging to the crater rim, the blue-domed churches, the extraordinary views over the caldera. They are standing on the rim of a volcano. They are looking into the grave of a civilization. Sometimes history changes not by war, but by the earth itself. Epilogue: The Atlantis Connection. We raise the Atlantis hypothesis with appropriate scholarly caution. Plato's Atlantis story, in the Timaeus and Critias, written circa 360 BCE, describes an island civilization of extraordinary sophistication located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the Strait of Gibraltar. The geographical mismatch with Santorini has led most scholars to regard the Santorini-Atlantis connection as unlikely as a literal reading. However, the parallel between the Minoan collapse and Plato's story is haunting and has genuine popular appeal. We believe that presenting it as evocative speculation rather than fact is the right approach. Connecting threads. This episode connects directly backward to Episode 6, New Kingdom, Egypt. Minoan ambassadors appear in Egyptian tomb paintings, and the Thera ash cloud reached Egypt. A brief visual callback to the Egyptian New Kingdom context grounds the Minoans in the broader ancient world narrative. The episode closes with a direct bridge to Episode 8, the Bronze Age collapse. The Mycenaeans, who replace the Minoans in this episode, will themselves be destroyed in the next. Our running thread of civilizational fragility is at its most explicit here. The Mycenaeans are both the destroyers of the Minoans and the next victims of history. Historical accuracy notes. The dating of the Thera eruption, 1628 BCE versus circa 1500 BCE, both dates are presented with appropriate qualification. The radiocarbon and ice core evidence strongly supports the earlier date, but this conflicts with conventional archaeological chronology based on pottery sequences. The debate is active and unresolved. Viewers interested in the technical details can be directed to the further reading list. Linear A, still undeciphered as of 2024. Linear B, used by the Mycenaeans, was deciphered by Michael Ventris in 1952 and shown to be an early form of Greek, one of the great intellectual achievements of 20th century scholarship. The Minotaur connection. The interpretation of the Minotaur myth as a memory of Minoan bull leaping and Knossos is a scholarly hypothesis, not established fact. It is presented as such in the episode. The claim that no human remains have been found at Akrotiri is accurate as of recent excavation reports, suggesting an organized evacuation before the eruption. Key artifacts and sites for visual reference. The frescoes of Akrotiri, National Archaeological Museum, Athens. The Blue Monkeys, Spring Fresco, and Flotilla Fresco are among the most beautiful surviving Bronze Age paintings. The Palace of Knossos, Heraklion, Crete. Arthur Evans's controversial reconstructions are visually powerful even if archaeologically debated. Minoan gold jewelry and pottery, Heraklion Archaeological Museum, one of the world's great collections of Bronze Age material. The Lion Gate at Mycenae, one of the most evocative Bronze Age sites in the world, and a powerful visual contrast to the open, unfortified Minoan palaces. Sources and further reading. The Minoans by Rodney Castleton. The End of the Bronze Age by Robert Drews for context on Mycenaean expansion. Atlantis Destroyed by Rodney Castleton for the Atlantis Hypothesis, treated with appropriate skepticism. The Bronze Age Eruption of Thera by Christos Doumas for the Akrotiri excavations, Michael Ventris and John Chadwick, documents in Mycenaean Greek for the Linear B decipherment. This brings us to the end of episode 7 of Turning Points in History. Santorini and the Fall of the Minoans, the eruption that shook the ancient world. Thank you for watching. Join us next time for episode 8, The Bronze Age Collapse, when civilization almost ended.